So I have a confession to make, which is an opinion that might not be popular, but I do believe that most of the best selling books could be summarized into one chapter because there's so much fluff. And so today I would like to discuss why you and I and everybody should read fewer books but better books. And I would like to share my experience as a philosophy PhD student with ADHD. Oh yeah, I have that problem too. A lot of brokenness going on. But, do not despair because I don't despair. And let's dive in together in these tips about reading fewer books but better books. Let's go. So welcome everybody to the Philosophy in Real Life podcast, where we strive to live in the most truthful and loving way possible while unmasking the wrong philosophies and interpretations of the world. I am your host, Carlos Santos Aguirre, a philosophy PhD candidate from Spain. So hola a todos, hola mi gente, hello everybody, hello my people. I hope you're having a lovely day. It's still hot in Spain, in Madrid. Well, I'm actually right now in Toledo, which is 1 hour away. And, the other day I was really, really frustrated. It's funny because my wife was next to me. She was working. And I think I spent 1 hour trying to understand and summarizing and reading carefully 4 pages, if you're watching this on YouTube, 4 pages of this article by Charles Taylor, that is one of the readings I'm doing for my dissertation. Is called Justice After Virtue. I basically spent 1 hour deeply concentrated trying to summarize this or trying to understand these 4 pages, 2 sheets of paper basically, which was ridiculous. And not only that, but these 4 pages, I had read these 4 pages before, like twice, and still I couldn't understand. And so I was like, oh man. And then when I was feeling frustrated, it came to mind the productivity culture, online, and the speed reading and things like that. I'm like, come on, these people don't understand. I'm just done. And so anyways, now I'm not saying there's something wrong with reading books. I think there is something wrong with believing that just because you are reading a lot of books, you all of a sudden are becoming wiser or transformed from that reading. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's the case, or that's not necessarily the case, because it's very hard to quantify wisdom. I think one thing is to be familiarized with some ideas, and a very different thing is to actually deeply understand these ideas in your life. But I think that the result of this productivity culture, which obviously has many toxic aspects, but also good ones, I think that it has helped me tremendously. Many of the tips and books that I've read in the past with time management and things like that. But I think that a result of this productivity culture, this whole concept of the speed reading has become even more popular. You try to read as many pages as possible and things like that. And something that happens is that then people become overly obsessed with how many books, they finish, rather than how much their lives is being changed from reading or on the new information that they are acquiring by reading those books. A lot of people are surprised to know this, but I'm actually a very slow reader. And I also have huge problems with concentration, despite the fact that I can get very Spartan with my discipline with regard to technology and things like that when I need to study. I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, so it wasn't as a kid. And a lot of people who knows me really well, they were like, oh, I'm not surprised. It makes sense. I don't know if that was an insult or actually they were glad. But anyways, but today I would like just to share 5 tips that has helped me tremendously in my life. And 5 tips that perhaps is helpful for you, and about what books to read and how to grow and change as a result of those readings. Okay. So tip number 1 is to read about what is bothering you. Yes, I repeat, to read about what is bothering you. I remember when I got married, we were really broke, man. Like I was 23 when I married my wife. That was 2018. And no, oh my goodness. No, that was 2017 when I got married, And we were really broke, and I was like, oh man, like we didn't have any money for dates or anything like that. So it was like, and obviously the economic situation in Spain is not great, But there was a moment thinking in the living room, and I was like, oh man, I need to learn about money. I need to learn how to use it wisely so that, we improve our situation. And so I remember that I was so bothered by the idea that I couldn't even take my wife on a date, or that we couldn't organize a date together because money was really tight, that I decided, no, I'm going to learn about money. I'm going to learn how to make more money, and I'm going to try to improve this situation. And so I'm glad that my wife was really on board with that. And my wife is actually very risk adverse. She doesn't like risk. I can be a lot more impulsive, as you probably could tell already. And so basically I started reading about money, taking action, implementing steps and things like that, and compare different people who were helping. And so that was tough on me, because I was like, oh, now we have a little bit more money, and you are telling me that I cannot spend it, and I have to live as broke as before, or contain myself, or refrain myself. And so my wife is usually more sensible than me when it comes to that. So as you can see, I was reading about money because it was bothering me. And so when I was reading these type of books, I was reading it, man. Like I was like, I need to change something about my life, and let me think of me. And so these books really hit me. I remember reading the Millionaire Next Door. I don't remember right now the author. And I was like, man, they basically study the behavior of people with regular salaries in the United States, and the choices they make with their money, and how they retire at a great place financially compared to other people who actually make more money per month but spends it all. And so they are actually more broke, thinking that they can repay that with their jobs and things like that. But anyways, so when I was reading that, I remember, wow, it was hitting me. Like I have many character flaws that I need to at least recognize and get help. And so, because I would get fever, phone, I want a phone, I need a phone, I need this, I need that. And I would get fever of this lust for things, you know what I mean? The lies of marketing and things like that. Not that all marketing are lies, but most lies are marketing. You know what I mean? And so anyway, so that is an example of that. So when something is really bothering you, you will read, and you will read seriously. So maybe in your case it's not money, maybe it's climate change, maybe it's sexual ethics, maybe it's equality, maybe it's something about reality. But start reading about that. Do not be scared. At times we are scared of trying to read books that we feel like we have no business reading, like maybe scientific books or maybe more scholarly books. But don't be afraid. If you are really interested, you will be surprised how much your interest and your drive will take you, in learning so many things. So yeah, and becoming more educated, will also make you more humble and more, for the most part, more nuanced about things, For example, I have many friends that were like, oh, taxes and things like that. I was like, well, okay, read that book. And so they were like, oh my goodness, right now I don't know what to make of that and things like that, because they realized that their views were actually quite surface level discussions. And so once they go to scholars or people who are very knowledgeable in different fields, then you become, wow, I actually know very little. So that's tip number 1. Let's move on to tip number 2. Read books to be changed and not just to get more information. So information alone will not change anything in our lives. If you read a book, and if after reading a book nothing has changed in your life, why did you read it? You didn't get anything from it. You know what I mean? Unless it was forced, unless it was obligatory or compulsory for, whatever. But one thing I would like to clarify is that when I'm referring to being changed, I'm not just talking about external change, but maybe internal change. So let's talk about this change that can be internal and the change that can be external. For example, the internal change when reading a book might be that you start feeling or developing new feelings towards certain things that before you had negative feelings associated with that. Now, I will share a personal example. I was writing an academic paper for a journal here in Spain and talking to a professor. He said, "Okay, why don't you read the book The Tyranny of Merit by Michael Sandel, who is I believe, a political philosophy professor in Harvard." And I wrote a paper on, for this journal to publish about this book. By the way, I do recommend that book. That book is good stuff. It will make you think. And after reading that book, I was surprised that, in Spain, we pay a lot of taxes, okay? And it's not always reflected on society. However, after reading that book, my feelings towards paying taxes changed. I only had negative feelings before, and after reading that book, I was like, oh, I'm actually glad I'm paying taxes. I'm glad that, for example, women, when they give birth, they are able to take 4 months for maternity leave. I think that I want a society that gives that type of treatment towards women and also towards men, because it's actually men in Spain also get 4 months. And now that I have a baby boy and we take care of him, I realize, my goodness, I don't know how people do it without 4 months. You know what I mean? It can be really, really brutal and challenging on women's body and things like that. And obviously the house and maintaining and cooking, and it's just crazy. And in Spain, the company doesn't pay the maternity leave, is the government, the taxpayers basically, and so the government administers that to pay the maternity leaves and things like that. Now, does that mean that all money of the taxpayers go to the right reasons, the right causes, things like that? No. But if I had to choose one of the inconveniences, I think that, having all of these things as common goods in society in Spain, I do believe that I feel better with that type of compromise than women not having this type of maternity leave, or parents in general, men too, fathers. And so that is my opinion, so that was my change of heart, so to speak. So when I pay my taxes, I'm okay with it. I'm like, yes, absolutely. I want a society in which when women give birth, they have 4 months, and also the fathers, and they can be with their kids, and they can organize the house and take some time to be. So that is my take. Now, I don't believe that everything should be completely socialized and mismanagement of funds either. But definitely, I do not believe in this individualistic conception of society. I learned through this book that we are more in debt to one another than we realize. And this idea of the self-made person is actually a kind of a myth, which, by the way, we'll have an episode on meritocracy, and we'll dive really seriously on that topic, and you'll see why I hold the views I hold. And we also will read some of the excerpts about Michael Sandel and The Tyranny of Merit, which I highly recommend you read, regardless of what position you hold. I think it's going to be really profound reading. But I'm just sharing a internal change that it's not like I did more or I did less, but I became, I guess, more at peace or loving with this idea of giving my money so that other people are taken care of, basically. Now, another type of change could be the external, right? Like you read a book in the case of the financial situation, and it does change the outcome of your life. You know what I mean? And so that is just another example of that. But in internal matters too, because it's not just what we do, but how we treat other people in the way we do things, The quality of our doing matters. Not all type of doing or deeds or things that we do are equal, Like many times we can do things, but without any type of intentionality or care, So the idea is that we are present in whatever we are doing and do it gladly. Okay, so let's move on to tip number 3. Study things to discover truth, not just to confirm preconceived ideas that you already have. When I was in studying the linguistics literature, I used to organize at the university different debates. And just talking to university students, something I realized is that most of the university students were using the authors they were reading and the text and the quotations more as a way of masking or putting more beautifully or more eloquently the lies they wanted to believe, rather than actually challenge themselves seriously, through these readings to actually discover truth. So they were using the intellectual discourse just to be more sophisticated at justifying their way of living, rather than actually trying to change their way of living based on what they were reading. And so that's why I'm saying study things to discover truth, not just to confirm preconceived ideas about reality. And it is obvious that we all have lies we want to believe. If you ask yourself, okay, what are the lies I want to believe? And many will come to you. You will not have to try hard enough. And so recognizing your starting point is like, okay, I would like to believe this, even though I'm about to read an author that actually thinks the opposite. So let me see what I think of that. And so then you enter the reading. And it takes a lot of courage to actually research a topic that way. That's why when I research a topic, I'm actually quite scared, because I know where I'm going to start, but I don't know where I'm going to end. So it can be at times like, oh man, if I start studying this topic, I don't know, I might be called to do something more or be more or change my ways. And it's challenging and it can be uncomfortable and things like that. But please, don't do what Steven Crowder does, okay? So Steven Crowder is the guy that is the change my mind guy that goes to university and things like that. He said he wants to change his mind. No, he doesn't want to change his mind. It's so obvious when people use rationality to just get a reaction, to provoke, and just that, instead of actually creating true bridges of communication where we are actually engaging in true dialogue. That is why I don't usually like debates, because I feel like it forces people to defend a position that they might not even fully agree with and things like that. So it can get really uncomfortable. And there are winners and losers. And if that person wasn't a good debater, even though their view might have been correct, people will think that it wasn't just because that person wasn't a good debater. So that's why I like just genuine dialogue, high-level conversation, high-level dialogue. That is why you will never see me engaging any troll on comments, and even less on Twitter. I don't think it's useful. I don't think it's productive. I don't think it will take you anywhere. And so, anyways, and another thing, as I was saying about courage, it does take a lot of courage. I remember when I was reading Nietzsche for the first time, when I was doing my paper for my master's degree, Amor y Resentimiento, Love and Resentment, my book in Spanish, that was an adapted version of the thesis about Nietzsche, which hopefully I will get it translated into English next year so that you can read it. I remember reading Nietzsche in my living room, and nothing was happening externally. Everything was quiet and peaceful, and it was a rainy day. But inside of me, oh my goodness, it was war. I was like hurricanes and things like that. Like I was completely everywhere, scattered. Nothing was happening outside. Everything was happening inside of me. Okay, so it requires courage, because Nietzsche was confronting and killing a lot of views that I had about the world that were not adequate. However, I did respond to Nietzsche, even though he's dead and he cannot respond me back. So that might be cheating. But anyway, that's something else. All right, so let's move on to tip number 4. Pick the right book for the right season. So most books have their specific audiences. Most books have a target audience in mind, okay? And I feel like books could be understood better with the metaphor of education in general, right? I am an educator. So education in primary, education in high school, then college, and so on, right? And for each phase of the education system, you have different type of educator or teachers or mentors. And it's not that, the primary school teacher doesn't have any value. Actually, primary school teachers have a lot of value, but it just means that their purpose and the field of knowledge that they are trying to teach is very specific to a phase in the development of a human being. So I feel like with books it's the same. It's not like they are bad books per se, okay? As I said about the best-selling books from New York Times. I think that the issue is that there are books that it gets to a point that it's like, this is too much fluff. It's too much fluff. There is no substance. And I feel like sometimes books, they make it longer so that they could sell it, basically. Because if you were to summarize the ideas in one chapter, you would be able to do so. That doesn't apply to this article, Justice After Virtue by Charles Taylor. If you want to read it, you can find it online. But oh my goodness, that should have been a book, that article itself. And Taylor condenses everything too much at times, and so it takes forever to understand at times his thesis, but very powerful, very insightful. So anyways, pick the right book for the right season. So maybe you are already specializing in a field, and so reading certain books makes no sense. You should be reading harder books, better books. And so that means that it will take you so much time to finish some of these huge books. Does that make sense? And I'm mostly talking about essays, okay? I'm not referring so much about novels and things like that people read for fun for the most part. I'm not really a novel guy. I get distracted when reading novels. It's really hard for me to pay attention to that. And I'm more interested in essays, always. But anyways, so for example, let me show you, I will describe this to the people who are just listening. So it's like these books, right? You see this? So I'm basically holding the Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. This is the Spanish edition, very thick book. The font is very small. Now I'm gonna hold the book by Charles Taylor, Secular Age, Also, really huge book. The font is even smaller, which is terrible because it takes forever to read. And I could pick even another one, which was Sources of the Self and things like that. Well, anyways, if you were to read, for example, Sources of the Self and Secular Age by Charles Taylor, and you actually understand those two books, I feel like you will know more than many PhD level students in philosophy and in many other fields. Yeah, you will be even more equipped once you understand really well this text. Obviously, understanding Charles Taylor will take you to understand the entire tradition pretty much. But so that's what I'm trying to say. Is that it's not so much how many books you are reading, but the type of books you are reading in the right season in your life. Okay, maybe in other aspects you need a more initiation book. You know what I mean? Like languages, you start with an A1. Then an A2, then a B1, then a B2, then a C1, then a C2 level of German or something, And so the idea is to know where you are at with regard to that type of field and what you're trying to grow in. So if a book is not moving you in any way or in a deep way, maybe two things. Maybe it is the wrong season for that book. Maybe you are not in the headspace to be reading that type of book, even though it's so good. Or maybe it's the wrong book. Maybe you shouldn't be reading that type of book. If most books you feel like, oh man, I read this, it's so fast, so easy, I already know everything. Maybe you should be reading more deeper books that will actually enrich more your life. But let's not be elitist or pedantic about, always reading difficult books. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that, if you already are very knowledgeable, for example, in the field of productivity, and already a lot of things about time management, maybe you shouldn't be reading more about productivity. You should be reading many other things in your life that are bothering you and learning how to grow in those areas, And tip number 5, which is the last one, create a space for learning in your life. You will be surprised what you can accomplish if you are disciplined enough to maybe read 20 minutes each morning, drinking coffee, tea, or just looking outside the window, whatever. You know what I mean? Like you could read more. Like, for example, a person that reads 3 pages a day, 7 days per week, that would be what? 3 por 7, so that would be 21. That would be 21. So 21 pages per week. So then multiply that by 4 or by 5, depending on the month, and then multiply that by 12. So you might be a slow reader. That's okay. The idea is to enjoy the learning process, and that becomes something real in you. I feel like most of the time I spend my time rereading many things that I read because they were so rich and I didn't even grasp the entire thing. And so, yeah, create a rule of life, create a habit of protecting this space for learning. and that can be part of your ritual. And just start small, don't go crazy. I really like something that my brother Gabo tells me, which is try to have a minimum. Like, okay, if the ideal goal is to write 3 hours in your dissertation, have a minimum. Even in your worst day that you don't feel like doing it, at least do an hour and a half. And so find that range for you. Maybe you want to read 30 minutes, but it's better to read 10 than nothing. And I felt for the longest time in my life frustrated because when I was working just teaching English in academies and things like that, and I wasn't doing philosophy or reading anything profound, I was feeling like I was hungry for discovery. I have this huge hunger for discovery, for learning. And so I realized that, man, like I was doing so many things and I had this idealistic view of like, oh, I need to read 1 hour a day, even though I was packed with things. It's like, that was silly, It's better to read just 10 minutes instead of being fixated in reading 1 hour and then not doing it because you feel like, oh, it's not ideal this time and so I'm not going to do it, So anyways, make learning part of your life, We are always learning. It doesn't matter how much you know, because there's always something you don't know. There's always something we need to grow in. There's always something we need to improve and recognize our weaknesses and blind spots. So I hope that was helpful. So to summarize, read about what is bothering you. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, read to be changed, not just to get more information. Information alone will not help you change anything. You need to implement practices. Tip number 3, study things to discover truth, not to confirm preconceived ideas about reality. And tip number 4, pick the right book for the right season. And lastly, tip number 5, create a space for learning in your life and protect it. All right, let me talk a little bit about the next episode. Ladies and gentlemen, next episode we will have a case study in which we are going to address Andrew Tate and the decline of masculinity. Oh boy. I hope the top G does not come with his Bugatti and knocks at my door here in Spain. And after all, he did say in one video, by the way, that Spain is a failed society. Tremendo. So I don't think he's coming to Spain because we are a failed society. So anyways, what can you do? I won't get the privilege to have a top G punching me in the face for criticizing his conception of masculinity. But anyways, that is the next episode. So stay tuned, subscribe, share the love, share the wisdom, get my book, subscribe to social media. I need your support so that I'm able to keep doing this with better quality material, better content, and hopefully in the future, some guests. Okay? So that's everything on my end, everybody. I love you for free. Adios.